we welcome you to the Priscilla R. Tyson Cultural Arts Center for our Conversations and Coffee as we come together on this 30th day of May, 2024. Can you believe it's the end of May? Yeah. Yes, you're I'm Ellen O'Shaughnessy, coordinator of the program. We're delighted to have with us today Grace Johnson, Botanical Printmaker, who is our Loft Gallery artist and our artist in residence. Welcome, Grace. So glad to have you. You share with me and with us that you were born and raised in Columbus by parents who were hunters, fishermen, foragers, gardeners, arrowhead hunters, readers, beekeepers, antique collectors, world travelers, and Ohio natives. Mother, can you identify with that?
I can.
Hey, wonderful. Grace spent a lot of time traveling through Mexico with her family as she was growing up. She's now a mother, stepmother, daughter, wife, sister, aunt, cousin, and most recently, a 200-hour registered yoga teacher. Ah, amazing, awesome. Grace received her undergraduate degree in international studies with focusing on development theory and practice, and a master's degree in Latin American studies with her thesis on the Mosquito people's indigenous identities and the Sandinista Revolution of Nicaragua in the 70s and 80s. Throughout the 80s, Grace worked for the International Rescue Committee and the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees in camps throughout Southeast Asia and Central America. Throughout the 90s through 2022, Grace worked at The Ohio State University as Director of International Programs before retiring from Ohio State. And Grace served as the Chief of State for the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. In the midst of this amazing career, Grace began experimenting with natural dyes, though it was been a lifelong interest. So you were doing that all the time. You were studying and traveling. Amazing. Combining her life with the natural world and the traditional dye practices of weaving and embroidering in Latin America. Her first dyes are ones that are still some of her favorites, she shares, and ones that she can still find and grow locally. Onion skins, walnut, chestnut, goldenrod, Japanese indigo. About 5 years ago, Grace's interest in natural dyeing led her to the world of botanical printmaking on paper and fabric. This art form is also called eco-printing. Grace shares that before she had any formal instruction, she trialed and errored botanical printmaking on a range of natural fabrics like cotton, linen, silk, wool, hemp, rayon, learning about tanning and mordanting, the process for preparing fabric for dyeing. Workshops in Mexico, Indonesia, and New Mexico introduced her further into the art and practice of botanical printmaking, the chemistry of mordanting with mineral salts, iron, copper, aluminum, and the use of tannins, oak gall, sumac, quebracho, red. She learned practices for shifting natural dye colors through adjusting and balancing water chemicals. Grace's husband, Richard, where are you, Richard? Hey, you expanded your vegetable garden for her to include a number of dye plants, huh? Like black knight, pincushion, and more. Grace says she was, and I quote, seriously down the rabbit hole on dyeing and botanical printmaking. So during the pandemic, she converted her son's backyard playhouse into a studio. Is your son here?
I've got 2 biological and 1 elective.
Hey,
Row.
wonderful, welcome. And as you provided this, you converted this backyard into a studio. So for several years, you had been taking classes, printmaking, copper, enameling. So when you learned about our Artist in Residence program last summer, you applied. And wonderful that you bring yourself to us and the fruit, if I can use a pun here, of all that you're doing. So take it away, our Artist in Residence, Grace Johnson. Your name means blessing. Yay! Wonderful.
Okay, thank you so much. I first want to say huge thanks to Todd and Jen. I think she had to step out for a minute. Jeff, Stacy, Vossi in the back, Kyle, who's put up with all the little yoga teachers coming and dying outside when he's trying to teach a class, and my mentor and somebody I admire enormously, Marjane, who is here, thank you so much, who would come in and give very well guided advice, which I'm learning how to take, and I really appreciate that. To Karana, who teaches copper enameling, because she was sort of the first person that I took a class with here. We remain friends to this day. And of course, Jen Jolly Brown, with whom I've taken printmaking. I'm sure there's other people I've missed here at the Cultural Arts Center, but it's an extraordinary place, and I am so incredibly grateful, for having had this residency. It's been just next level. So anyway, what I want to do today is talk very briefly about sort of the main components of botanical printmaking, which, as I said, are sometimes called echo printing, but I like the term botanical printmaking better myself. And then I'd like to end up talking a little bit about what is going on with this art form in Indonesia, which is nothing short of extraordinary, and talk a little bit about what's happening there and the potential, and then a little bit also about Mexico, which is not so much botanical printing, but about the sort of resurgence and renewal of traditional natural dye stuffs. So to get started, first we need cloth, okay? And there are 2 types of cloths that we work with. We work with protein cloth. Protein cloth is cloth that is either silk or wool, full stop, okay? The other is cellulose cloth, which is cloth that is plant, coming from plants. So that would be cotton, linen, rayon, though I don't like working with rayon very much because of the method by which it's made does a lot of river pollution. Muslin. So I think that's sort of the main groups, or the 2 main groups. And each of those types of cloth, the cellulose cloth and the protein cloth, have very, very different ways of responding to and showing up with natural dyes. Silk and wool take natural dyes, here's an example of silk, very, very easily, okay? It's very smooth, you don't need to do much to prepare it for dyeing. Same thing with wool. This is a wool right here that I have, and we can pass these around. So with wool and with silk, we don't have to go through a whole lot of preparation. I know a number of natural dyers who are colleagues of mine who don't do anything to prepare it for dye. They just clean the cloth and then dye. Cellulose cloth, linen, hemp, cotton, muslin, all of those we need to work with a lot harder to get them to receive the natural dyes, not only receive it, but keep the natural dyes. Because the whole idea, of course, with natural dyes is that we do not, it needs to stay, okay? We want it to be light fast, we want it to be wash fast, and that it is, going to be permanent. Okay? And if we have prepared our cloth and our natural dyes properly, then that indeed will be the case. The colors are going to stay. Some of the things that we see on the internet, A big one is purple cabbage, blackberry. What's some of the other? You'll see those are not dyes, okay? They're good for Easter eggs, all right? They're very, very good for Easter eggs. They make lovely Easter eggs, but they are not what we call a substantive dye. A substantive dye are like onion skins, walnut, sappanwood, cochineal. We'll go into those in a little bit. Those are going to stay. They're what we call substantive. These other ones, more sort of vegetable-y dyes, like beet juice. Beet is a big one. Those are all what we call fugitive dyes. They run away. They're going to be a stain. They don't, not really much of anything, okay? So cloth is the first thing. With the cloth, we have to first make sure it is very, very well scoured. We need to get out scoured means washed really well. Washed, okay? We need to get out any dirt that's in it, any dust that is in it. Some of the antique or old linens that I like to work with are, old, dusty. They need to be really, really washed. With the cellulose cloth, with muslin, cotton, they need to be scoured by boiling to really get out any kind of soil. Silk and wool are it's a little bit more sensitive. We never boil them. We just wash them gently. But in order to really take up the dyes, yeah, Vasi?
What special kind of soap you use? You said to get it real clean, special kind of soap?
Well, when I'm working with the cellulose, with the cotton and all that, I use soda ash, okay? Soda ash, so you just boil it. With linen and silk, I'll use, just some very light, like Dawn natural, Dawn detergent, or not detergent, but, soap one, okay? So it needs to be very, very thoroughly cleaned, okay, before we can really work with it well. And sometimes with the cotton, the cellulose cloth, I will boil it several times and, and just work it over really good so that it's very clean. Okay, from that, then we move to preparing the cloth for dyeing. And this is the part that is often the most confusing. It was for me. The mordanting process for silk and wool is very simple, okay? Because again, those fibers take up natural dyes very easily, and so the mordanting process does not have to be very complex. Cellulose, on the other hand, the cotton, the linens, all of that, really need to be worked over with the mordanting process. And the mordanting process is, we use mineral salts, okay? The most common one that is almost always used is alum. Okay? You can even buy alum in the spice rack at the grocery store. It's used for pickling spice. It's used for marbling. There's many different kinds of alum. There's aluminum lactate, aluminum potassium sulfate. I work with all of them, but it's the most sort of accessible, the alum. The next one that I work a lot with is copper salts. Copper has a way of bringing out greens. It is considered a saddener, and that it brings more sort of darkness in a way, but it also brings out green. The other one I really like, and that we use a lot in botanical printing, is iron. And I try to, whatever extent possible, make my own iron water. I pick up old rusted things, and put it in water with vinegar, and then we'll have an iron water solution. Iron also is considered a saddener, and it is very, very important to the botanical printing process. Cotton can use, and I often do, has an additional step that becomes before the mordanting, and that's tanning. So with cotton, we tan the cotton, then we dung the cotton. In India, they, of course, would be using cow dung or cow manure. Here, cow dung, cow poop, right, exactly. And so, no, it's okay. And but here, of course, I wheat bran because that has the ability also. What that dunging process or the wheat branning process does is prepare the cotton so that it can really grab on to both the mordant and to the dye color. Okay, so that's the sort of the preparation of the cloth. That's the whole sort of thing unto itself. I have recipes that I've learned from other people. I have recipes that I've worked myself, that I trial and error with, but the success of that process deeply determines the success of what your final result is of the botanical printing. Okay, then we get on to what the really fun stuff is, which is the color. And the color is provided by the natural dyes, okay? I want to pass this one around, okay, so you can take a look at it. This one is one of my favorites. Timur, maybe you can sort of just show it to people or take out a little bit. This is, well, I should say first, dyes fall again into two groups. Ones that are insects and ones that aren't insects. The one that I'm passing around right now is cochineal. And we get it in Mexico. It comes from, and it just goes back to ancient times. You'll see it in Mexico. It's this tiny little, it's an insect that attaches itself to a certain kind of cactus. There are farms in Mexico where they propagate, they put the insects on the cacti, and then people walk around with huge sheets when the insect has died, scrape it off, and that's cochineal. Back in the day, it was used actually as a red. Yeah, it's got kind of a smell to it. It was used as red for lipstick, okay? The color from it. So it's an insect dye, okay? And from cochineal, we can get a red like this, okay? We can get Pepto-Bismol pink, okay? Okay. We can get that kind of color, or we can get this as well, okay? It is pretty, that one. Here, so I can pass those around.
I have a question for
Sure.
you.
Uh-huh.
Will you show us how it's done?
Yeah, I'm going to show you that, just when I get through the dyes.
Okay.
Okay?
Because I'm curious to know, so I can take it back to the art studio and maybe do it.
Good. I really did want to show that because, again, it's very hard to conceptualize it unless you see somebody do it. Okay? And then we have plant dyes. And the plant-based dyes are from trees. They can be the heartwood. This, for example, is one of my favorites. This is Osage orange. A lot of us in Central Ohio know about the Osage apple or the orange. And there's that sort of legend that you put it in the basement and it will keep away spiders, I think, is that. But that's not what we use. We use the heartwood of the Osage orange. Osage orange can give us all of these kind of lovely colors. Yeah, it can do orange. It all depends, again, on how we shift the colors, and I'll get into that just in a second. Another one of my favorites are just plain old onion skins, okay? I'm really known at the Kroger's where I go. I go through there early in the mornings, and the produce lady has always put aside a whole bunch of onion skins for me because they are a dreamy, very low, expensive dye, and it's fabulous. This is one that my husband grows for me, which is called Black Knight Scabiosa, which is not as well known, which can give us some beautiful kind of blue, green grays, okay? It's called Black Knight. If you go to a nursery, it's more often called pin cushion. It's a very leggy plant with a sort of a pin cushion at the top, if you will, and it just gives dreamy blues and grays and gray blues. And then there's indigo. We grow in our backyard Japanese indigo. So this is not vat dyeing. What I'm talking about now is fresh dyeing with indigo, okay? And it looks like basil, kind of, right? So you pick it when it's at its peak, put it in a blender with ice cold water, blend it up, and then submerge your silk into it. And so instead of giving a blue jean indigo, it gives us this beautiful aqua turquoise. So it's, again, just another really dreamy colors. Goldenrod, sunflowers, dandelions produce yellows. It is very easy with natural dyes to get to yellow and orange and red. It's much more complicated to get to green and blues, okay? There are really only two pathways to get to blue. Indigo is one of them. And then there's a dye called logwood, which we can adjust from a purple, like that's in here, to kind of like a navy, okay? So the part of this practice in botanical printing is really knowing also about our natural dyes, okay? And about and how they're going to work. These are examples of more of the indigo, of the fresh indigo, okay? So in this process, we've learned a lot, or I've learned a lot again. Then the final part, before I sort of demonstrate for you, are the plants themselves. Because if you look at my work that is out there, if you look at some of this, you're going to see that there are leaves, that there are flowers, that kind of thing. There are certain leaves and flowers which are going to have a certain amount of tannin in them or color, so they are going to be able to print really well. If you look at this one, this is dogwood. You can see a lot of dogwood leaves in this. You can pass that one around, okay? Just see. I know. I think it's really neat too.
How do you get those images in there?
So that's what I'll get to next. Okay. So let's say this is, if you want to stand up, I don't know if you're going to need to stand up or whatever. I'm wondering, Reel, do you want to come and just hold the microphone for me while I demonstrate this? Okay. This is my younger son, Reel Chaudhry. Okay. Okay. All right. This is going to be the receiving cloth. Let's pretend this is the receiving cloth, which I have scoured, which I have mordanted. Okay? So it's prepared for dyeing. All right? I'm going to wring it out so it's damp. You never work with cloth that is super wet. Okay? I'm going to put it down on my table. Then I'm going to have over here, let's say, a whole bunch of, stay up here, just sit here, just in case, leaves and flowers that I have collected that I am confident are going to have really good results, okay? So I know that dogwood leaves are really good, okay? I know sumac is good. I know that certain flowers like coreopsis, cosmos, sunflowers have a lot of pigment in them, and it's pigment that is not going to run away. Marigolds. We use marigolds all the time in Mexico, both for printing and for dyes, okay? They're just incredible. So then I will lay out on my piece of cloth, okay, what I want to print. I can do moon side or sun side, okay, to get different effects. To see if I want more of the veins in the leaves, I'm going to put the moon side down. If I want more of the silhouette or just sort of that, I'll put them. So you can go back and forth, and that's one of the interesting things is playing around with not only the design, but also whether leaves and the flowers are moon-faced or sun-faced, okay? I really like working with roots and weeds and creeks. Moon. The moon side is what?
Yes, and
The underside. Yeah, the underside of the leaf, right. Moon side or sun side. And I like working with weeds and roots and stuff. And this son here just recently got a dog that has been very impactful in all of our lives. And so I take him out for runs in the woods, and it's given me opportunity to like dig up, you know, sort of whatever. Now I do want to say something here about the ethics, okay? If you get into this, you don't want to go around like grabbing stuff out of people's gardens, okay? You want to grow your own stuff, right? Okay? So I mean, there's the whole, you know, you need to be careful about where you're picking stuff up, okay? Or where you're sourcing. Then, okay, here, you want to hold this. Okay. So we've got the receiving cloth. We've got the plants and the life, whatever I want to print. Then I'm going to have another piece of cloth, which is flannel cotton that I have soaked in whatever the natural dye that I want the background color to be. So, for example, here with this scarf, I used a bunch of different colors for the background, all right? This is weld, which is a beautiful plant we also grow to get deep yellows. I used logwood for that, onion skin. So I had different pieces of cloth that have been submerged into the natural dye material, and then I lay it out, okay? So let's just pretend this one is just one color, and let's say it's marigold. I'm going to put that on top, okay? Then I'm going to put a big brick or a six-pack or something here to hold it down, okay? Because we want tight, okay? You want it to be very tight because it is a contact print, right? It's a contact print at the end of the day. Surface design is a fancy name for what this is. It's a contact print. So then I take it and roll the whole thing up, pull, roll, okay, until I get something that looks like this, okay? Then I use ace bandages. I used to try to be real, like, I don't know, like romantic about it, would have strings and everything. No, now I just go straight to using ace bandages because I can use them over and over again, and they're super tight, and they make the thing like really, really, okay? Then I take this whole thing, thanks, that's fine. Then I take this whole thing, okay, and then I simmer it or steam it in, you know, like a propane burner, like a stove thing, like a grill, right? Whatever. So that I've got a great big whopping pot like this big, okay? I put water in it. I put something up to raise it up so it can be steamed and put my work in there and then steam it. How long I steam it depends on whether I'm working. If I'm working with linen, you need to steam it for a long time because that's really dense, right? If I'm working with a piece that is really thick, really long, I'm going to steam it longer. If I'm working with charmeuse silk, something like this, probably 60 minutes is really going to be all that it needs. So then I take it out of the steamer. You unroll the whole shebang, okay? You put the dowel away. You take off the top. Scrape off all the leaves and everything there, and then you see what you've come up with, okay? And everything, again, is impacted by, well, the pH of the water, okay? That's one of the things. The density of the dye, or like how saturated the dye material was, whether the leaves and the flowers are fresh or dry, how long I steamed it, and how I mordanted or prepared the cloth. If I've not done a good mordanting job, I can tell right away. It's like there's just not going to be the definition. There's not going to be the definition. The color's not going to be as saturated, you know. I mean, you know, so that's why the scouring, the cleaning, the washing the cloth, and then the mordanting cloth is huge, and it's a lot of trial and error, okay? Then I rinse it to get rid of any residue. And then you have your work, okay? Sometimes I will find that the blanket cloth or the cloth that was submerged in the dye color to give the background, that I like that. So some of my pieces out here, not only, you'll see it's almost like terry cloth, okay? So it's not only the targeted piece, but I've also liked the result of what this piece has been too. So I will use both of them, okay? This art practice is big in certain places. It's big in Netherlands. It's big in the United Kingdom. We see a lot of it there. It's big in Australia. I have friends in California who are on the coast, of course. Here in Columbus, I know a lot of natural dyers. There's lots of people who, like me, are just, you know, fascinated by the different colors that we can get from things that we grow in our gardens or forage. But unfortunately, I really don't have many colleagues or haven't met many people who do botanical printmaking. So that's why I kind of felt like it was important to go through that. So I hope that was interesting because people, again, I'd never understood, or it took me a long time to understand before I took a workshop, is how the color of the background, okay? And there will be times where I don't want to have a colored background, and so I will work only with tannin leaves and iron water. So that piece that was going around, the one with the dogwoods on it, that has no background dye. Yeah, that one. I was using just the iron water as the blanket. So there's a million different ways that you can do it. It's very, yeah, hey.
I want to ask something like this. How long, is there a limit to how long you can do it? If you wrap it, I know you have constraints on what you can fit in your steamer, so to speak.
Yeah, and it's like 21 inches. So that's, I've been to, I can get quite a few. I have like this Whopper restaurant grade thing that I'm, steaming the stuff in. So it's big. I can get like 10 maybe of those 21 inches there. And so to conserve, I try to do a whole lot at the same time, okay? So this art practice, there's a million different things to do. There are ways people just do straight up bundle dyeing. They'll have cloth,
So you're talking about doing a bunch of bundles at once. Will the colors affect each other?
No, because they're bound up very tightly, okay? And so no, they're not going to. Sometimes though, I will decide I want to do what is called a dirty pot. And that is where I'll have a pot of water and I'll put lots of leaves and onion skins and, just like whatever, a lot of eucalyptus. And I will not wrap the bundle in a ace bandage. I'll just wrap it with string and put that and boil it. And then you get some very interesting, because the color of the water that it's submerged in, of course, will go out into the final.
What's the most plant that gives out the most dyes?
Well, marigold is huge. Marigold, and throughout Mexico, we use marigold like all the time.
You use that a lot?
I'll use it a lot. Because marigold, again, it can go all the way from yellows to where you can almost shift it to a brown, a beautiful amber brown, by using...
In Mexico?
I spend a lot of time there. I can throw onion skins. This is a good question because you don't have to work just with one dye, okay? So I'll make like a concoction that will have marigold, onion skin, and eucalyptus in it. And it can produce, again, some lovely colors. I don't know if I've got any of those right here, right? Well, like, for example, this color right here, okay? That is like 3 different dyes, natural dye, that's got marigold in it, onion skin, and eucalyptus. Okay?
Yeah, onions, sometimes when you're cutting the onions, the outside skin will actually give you a yellow tint on your...
And it's even better when we simmer it. Okay, just get glorious colors.
The Indians, what did they use back that period of time?
What, Native Americans in this country or like India? India.
In this country?
Out in the Southwest, you see a lot of, and my husband has tried to grow it. We haven't had too much success. It's called the Hopi sunflower, okay? There was a lot of using that to get produce some light blues, and even you could shift it even all up to some blacks even. That's the one, goldenrod, because goldenrod is very, growing in fields, goldenrod is very easy to grow and to pick, right? Walnuts, no, that's more here. Walnuts would be in this part of the country, with deciduous trees. So, again, the beauty of this practice for me is, again, you really learn about where you are, right? You really learn.
I'm curious what the storage is like. If you've kind of concocted a favorite dye color, if you're able to save that to use for later.
Not really. I will keep some dyes. I can keep them, like I've got this really, it looks awful, but it's going to be a beautiful color, a eucalyptus onion one that's been going, I've been having sort of sit down there for 2 weeks, okay? And I've got stuff saturating in that I'm going to be using. But some of the other ones are just, they're just, and you exhaust it. Once you start taking dye from it, you put your cloth in, then sooner or later it gets more and more and more exhausted, right? And those colors can be pretty too. right? And so it's all about learning again about how to work with the natural dyes, how they can be shifted in color, how they can or cannot be combined, and how they're going to react to the mineral salts of alum or copper or whatever, however I've prepared the cloth. Okay? Sure. Uh-huh.
So when you roll it up, the impression of the plant material, the botanicals, is that coming from just the pressure? Is it essentially a resist dye?
It's a resist dye, but it is also leaving its own. Its own, yeah. And I had, like for example, one of my favorite dye plants is Coreopsis. Okay. So you can see in this little thing here, okay, you can see the Coreopsis. So the Coreopsis is not only showing you what it looks like or shape, but it's also giving a color.
So is this without a background?
Yes, this is without a background, exactly. That was just like iron water, okay? So, and there's some flowers that are, you know, because of their chemical makeup, what they've got that's producing the yellows and the red are going to just really be, you know, really bounce or really pop.
How do you get multiple background colors in one piece? I'm trying to.
I will, yeah. So I'll have, like, I'll look at my big long cloth and I'll say, okay, I want some yellows, I want some purples, I want some reds. And so I will have the dye blanket that goes on top. So I'll like soak one in walnut, I'll soak one in weld, you know, like that, and then I'll just layer them on. Okay, or not layer them on, I will, you know, put them side by side. So you can get, you know, sort of, you know, interesting colorways from how you lay out the cloth. Okay, so it doesn't have to be, and sometimes I'll take a ribbon that I really like, a color of a ribbon, and just sort of put that in there too, so that, you know, so there's like, that's what's so cool about it. There's just like a million ways to be creative with this. Okay? Any other questions? Yeah, sure.
I'm sorry, just one more.
No.
So I have some experience with just synthetic dyes.
Sure.
I've always found natural dyes to be a little bit, I don't know, overwhelming to me because there's so many steps with the tanning, morganting, etc. How would you recommend somebody start with this process?
Well, I think I'm going to be teaching here in the fall. Okay, so there's that. Okay, but in terms of, you're right. It took me a long time. I started on cotton, on cellulose, which in a way I'm glad now because that's the hardest. And so that was just, it's cheaper. You know, silk and wool are expensive. And cotton, you know, I mean, you can get old sheets. I mean, you know, as long as it's 100%, okay, 100% cotton, right? And there is the step of tanning. If you want that kind, if you want to take something to browns and to blacks, you're going to need to tan, okay? If you're not worried about that, then the step of tanning is not necessary, okay? Yeah. But it took me like years to understand that. You know what I mean? Just a trial and error. And somebody else had a question?
I
Yeah.
had a question about the color shifts in the mordants. Is it like predictable, the color shift with various dyes, or is it very particular? Like say you're using Coreopsis and alum
Right.
versus iron.
Oh yes,
versus-
alum
so-
is always a brightener. Help the dye to stay and really be light and wash fast, but it's always a brightener. Iron and copper are always saddeners. So
Or you mean like done?
darker.
Shifting to-
Well, darker and making it, I don't know what, Jen, what that would be called. I mean, like making it, giving it a different hue. Yeah. Right. I mean, you can,
in terms
if you know what you're doing, okay? And that, again, there's books that are written on this, and there's people that I've learned from, and then just a whole lot of experimentation. I mean, I like working, for example, like last summer, I kind of each week I took a different dye and just did nothing but do samples with that dye to see how many. So, for example, if I work with cochineal, that insect dye, if I put lime juice in it, if I add something acidic, it's going to go very orange, okay? If I add a little bit of eucalyptus to it, a tannin, it's going to go in another. And so I write it down. And so I know, I mean, it is you know, you're never, I mean, for somebody who's super precise and wants to produce things that are always going to look like, you know, it's hard. It's very much one of a kind thing. But if we know what we're doing and are not sloppy about how we've mordanted and how we're preparing the dyes, then we can have a very strong idea of what it's going to go to.
And you keep a lot of records.
Yeah, Probably not as much as I should, but yeah, because I'll find a color and I'll be like, oh my God, I want to be able to do that again. But then there'll be times like these two colors, which I just love, that I brought up because I've been obsessed with ribbons and all that. But I'm drawing a blank exactly on what I did to get these colors, and I really wish I'd written it down. I mean, I have a good idea what the base was, but I'm not, you know, like, I know I did some color or mixing of dyes, and I love these colors because it's hard to get to green. You'd think that it would be easier to get to green, hey, but it's not at all, okay? You really need to work with indigo and shift indigo to get to greens.
If you never did that kind of dye like you're showing us, is it real hard for somebody that don't do that? See, I sew and I paint, but I don't know how to do that.
I would say you'd start with onion skins.
Thank you.
Okay. No, I mean it. Really, I do. Onion skins, it's very available. It's inexpensive, and you can get beautiful, beautiful colors from it, depending. If you're working with a rougher material like a cotton, you're going to be getting a certain kind of onion skin color. If you're working with silk, it's going to be, so that's, you know, but onion skins is a great place to begin.
Because I do all kind of, I make animals,
Right.
I've sewed, but I've never did anything like
Sure.
that. This is interesting to me.
Good, I'm glad. I'd like to, if there are not any questions right now, and
I just wanted to ask you about the images that come forward on, are they a surprise to you too?
well, not if I've been thoughtful about what I'm doing. Okay, now sometimes,
The piece is beautiful.
this one right here?
Yes.
Well, this one I just was a Christmas present, and that I gave to my husband, actually, and I wanted it, this is called Rick's Garden, and it's just, you know, like, this is pretty basic, right? But I wanted it to look kind of garden-like with the flowers. And the background is, I love that color. This normally is a blue, a purple. The logwood, heartwood is usually purple, but I put iron in it and exhausted a little bit and got more of this like navy-ish blue.
And you got those images. Tell me how you did that.
Well, I walked around the garden and I just picked stuff. You know, we've got some marigold, dried marigold up here in the corner. There's sunflowers in here. There's dandelions in here. This is one that I really love, but it is super hard to get. That one that looks like a arrow, kind of. That's Grevillea robusta. I love the shape of that one. So, you know, so yeah, I have a good idea of how it's going to come out. These were seeds, like from tree seeds. Yes.
Do you let the image set on the cloth?
Yes, but I bind it up.
Bind it up.
Bind it up around a dowel.
Now,
Super tight.
real tight.
Real tight, okay?
You
And then
put-
I steam it.
Yeah, and you steam it.
And the steaming fixes it, okay? The steaming fixes it. It would not be necessary to steam it if it was just a dye.
Okay.
But to get the imprint and to let the flowers or the leaves or whatever release what they have, it's got to be steamed.
Do I go out in my, if I went out in my garden and then wrap everything, do I dry it or do I do it immediately? You know, with
You can work with both dried and fresh.
Okay.
The main thing is to choose flowers that have a color that they're going to give, okay? And that's why cosmos, marigolds, coreopsis, black knight scabiosa, those flowers are just dreamy. Sumac is really good.
And then you wrap it really, really tight.
Super tight, yep.
And then you put it in a boiling pot.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a big pot. I have like a thing at the bottom so that it's not, in the water, and I steam it.
You steam it.
I steam it.
Boil it, you steam it.
I steam it. Some people boil. Sometimes I do boil, but I like the results better if I steam. Hey.
Do you secure the wrap around the rod with like twine or something, or is it just
I use Ace bandages, okay? Like those great big elastic things. You can pull them super tight, and they are they're really good. Before I end, if I could just, I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in Indonesia, because I had some Indonesian friends. Assalamu alaikum. They were not able to come, unfortunately, but I went out to Indonesia in November and was completely blown out by what is going on there, okay? They have taken botanical printmaking to a level that is like out of control. So let me show you, for example, this is a t-shirt, okay? You got, not made by me, okay? They have taken it, you walk it around, show people, Brady, okay? And I don't know if that one, we had people over on Sunday night, and I had a bunch of these and was giving them to see. The Indonesians are tiny, so it's kind of hard to get things. But Indonesia, maybe about 20 years ago, started really going full force with this art form, and what nature is like there, their forests, their fields, everything. I mean, they're working with teak, they're working with mango leaves. I mean, it is like incredible. And it's a very, very collective effort. So, for example, I would go to villages and we'd be sort of like in an outdoor sort of area, maybe covered, that would be as big as this room. There'd be like 10 of us on one side, 10 of us on another. There'd be this cloth out there. We would have all gone out in the forest and picked up leaves and picked up whatever we wanted, okay? And everybody would, do that. I mean, it was huge. These pieces of cloth were like huge. And then the cover cloth that we put to give the background color, we would then put that on top of it and then roll it up around. We'd use bamboo, great big bamboo sticks, but inside of them were garden hoses. So then once you got the whole thing bound up, we'd pull out the bamboo and be able to wrap or coil around the garden hose to put them in steamers that were like twice as big as this. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. It was, and they're really into, I mean, it's like a movement there. It's about environmental education. It's about creating revenue for communities. And their whole thing is garments, okay? They are making clothes, and they are selling them on pop-up shops, and it's part of, their whole like villages that are sort of, into this whole endeavor. And it's extraordinary. It's clearly going to become the number 2 underneath batik. Batik, of course, is the traditional art form that Indonesia is so known for. The government of Indonesia has said, well, every Friday, government employees are asked to wear the traditional Indonesian batik dress. And now they've said that one Friday out of a month, they want to have them wear their eco print or botanical print. Let me show you this. This is another example, okay? Here, Brady, do you want to take an end like this? So again, this is not even half as big as the kind of thing that they will make, okay? So you can see then, and it's a Muslim majority country, and so the women are pretty covered up, right? In terms of like, baggy pants and sort of tunic tops and these incredibly beautiful hijabs that they will wear that are made from this. I mean, like I said, people would be wearing whole outfits of it. It was one of the most beautiful things. I just couldn't believe it. Went to one village where there's a young man who is sort of running a whole cooperative thing, and through the endeavors of the collective, they've been able to buy a school bus to take, so that kids are taking a bus to school rather than walking, Lord knows how many miles. Zero Western input. See, that's the other thing that like blew me away. There's no NGOs, no outside anything. This is like a totally homegrown thing. And I mean, it was just like being in some kind of heaven. I could walk into a little shop and they would have just like a bajillion different kinds of tannins already dried that I could say, oh my God, it was amazing, okay? Very quickly about Mexico. Mexico in the 1960s began to see in the markets and with the people who were the traditional, making traditional embroidery and backstrap weaving and all of that, began to turn to using synthetic threads because the tourists were liking more sort of like the flash and dazzle of the synthetics, and also it was cheaper and not as long and consuming a time as to be working with the natural dyes. They could sell it quicker, right? Unfortunately, a lot of the stuff you see in markets now in Mexico is probably from China, okay? But in the part of Mexico where I live, which is Chiapas, which is a lot more like Guatemala, there's just a very, very high indigenous population of the contemporary Maya. There's been this movement to, I mean, it's never died out, but to resurrect, to to recharge the natural dye production, okay? And they're not into this botanical printing, but in terms of working with the natural dyes, that has really been seeing a comeback. The material that they sell, they will, it's a kind of a cold area, so they're working more with wool. The women are sheep herders, so they're working more with wool, like this kind of thing. So you can't botanically print something that's wool, okay? You can dye it, of course, and do lovely dyes. And, of course, then they dye their threads, their wool threads, and then incorporate. Those materials or those products are going to be way more expensive, of course, than what most tourists are going to buy. But it is something that's really good. There's a professor from Mexico City who I'm very good friends with who is coming 3 or 4 times a year to where I am in Mexico to bring together women from the highlands so that we can, really just sort of like, it's like just have a weekend of where we just all go out and dye things and experiment, okay? And they're working again with materials or with leaves and with plants that, that I'm not familiar with. There's one called huicle, which I still don't really understand where they're getting that. So, but it's really neat to see that. It will never be back to, be what people are wearing all the time, but it is like they're not wanting to lose it. And we see that same thing going on in Oaxaca. Oaxaca has a lot of, again, it's not the highlands, it's more hot, but there's a lot of more resurgence of or attention given to the beauty of natural dyes and making sure that it doesn't get lost. So I think that's probably it for now, unless there are any other questions. Thank you.
Amazing.
Were there any language challenges in Indonesia as far as working with the people and how that?
It's really interesting. I really want to learn Indonesian. I had worked and lived in Malaysia, and Bahasa Malaya is very similar actually to Bahasa Indonesia, so a lot of it actually did come back. But, it's like many places around the world, people spoke English. A lot of people spoke English, or enough to be able to get by. Just, and we were on Java, okay? But for this sort of big event that they were having, men and women and families were coming from like all the different islands. Like I said, I had never seen anything like it. It was incredibly cool. Incredibly cool, except their sizing on clothes is just not, we need to work on that. And they're also dyeing on leather, making shoes. Yeah, that's a whole other thing. I spent a day just learning how to, using goat skin. Now, the vegans and the vegetarians among us probably find that objectionable, but the Indonesians don't. Yes, sir.
Can you use roses to get the color?
Roses, not for the color, but rose leaves are the best plant.
You got something up there with the rose on it.
That is actually eucalyptus, but what I use from the rose plant are the rose leaves. The rose leaves have so much tannin in them, you could do a piece that would just be rose leaves. And again, it's so much fun to do the back and forth, the shadow, the moon side or the sun side. Whether you do back or, that kind of thing to get the veins or whatever. Yeah, no, absolutely. And a lot of people who do this like using rose petals. It shifts, it can shift things. Okay?
It just doesn't have the pigment. It
Have a
doesn't have the
garden.
chemicals in it to be able to stay.
Let's talk about your husband's garden.
Oh my God. I think we have been. Oh.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Grace. That was really good. Like, I'm an archaeologist by trade, and you know, we have a lot of conferences and talks, and people try to explain new things they do, new techniques, new results. And Grace has the gift. Like, you know, a lot of people are really good at things and have a good grasp on their work. But Grace can also, I think, explain her work very well. And I really enjoyed the chance to pass all these things around. Okay. And then the other thing, as far as the archaeological perspective, like, you know, the garden, my garden is just, you know, vegetables. It's not Native American vegetables or anything like that. But it started out as just things you could eat, which I'm all for that, right? But then Grace kept saying, why don't we add a few of these? You know, is there going to be room? And yeah, okay, there's a little more room. And Ohio is a great place. You can grow just about anything here. So we've had pretty good success, and I've learned a lot about that too. And then a lot of the methods she uses too, it kind of rings bells about, you know, in ancient times, you know, a lot of the same, like dyeing and all that stuff was really amazing. You just think about silk for one thing. You know, when the Chinese figured out how to make silk, boom, you know, and then it spreads around to the rest of the globe. But a lot of the, you know, so and we have mulberry trees in our backyard. So I kept thinking, well, you know maybe we can get into. But and then the wood ash stuff. You know, we archaeologically we find in prehistoric times they were using wood ash for various things. And we figure out wonder what that was for. And then at Ohio State, Catherine Jakes, who was in clothing and textiles, also did a lot with trying to reconstruct the dyes used by Native Americans with some success. But this is global. I mean, a lot of these things come by, but they all have really deep roots, you know. And so even though our garden isn't an authentic, you know, traditional, some gardeners are really amazing when they do use traditional plants and traditional ways, but we have a pretty good variety of dye plants and other things.
You know, the Whetstone Park of Roses, they have like an herb, remember that?
Yeah, that's right, that's true.
They have a little section of it, which is like a dye garden. And so you can see they have like medicinal herbs and, you know, all that, but they'll have a dead section.
Enjoy the gallery. Just take a walk through that beautiful loft gallery.